Are NFTs dead, or are we going to get a resurgence?
I mean, I'll quickly start. NFTs were never dead to begin with. I mean, we're still talking about, even at its lowest period since the launch of NFTs, was doing, and this was post-FTX, was doing like $150 to $200 million a month in sales, and now it's like 500-600. And I think for those, the lens I take is a little bit like, back when people used to talk about how China was dead, right? But everyone who lives in China was like, what the hell are you talking about, right? And it's the same basically in the crypto world when you're with NFTs. If you're not in NFTs, you think it's dead, but if you're in NFTs, it's really vibrant. There's some really cool innovations. I don't know how many people have heard of Punk Strategy, or for instance, Hyper. I mean, that only just launched a few days ago, and it's basically rocking the charts, and people are, I think it's eclipsed even in value, similar to Bored Apes or higher and Pudgies, right? But literally overnight, trading $50 million a day. So it's definitely vibrant.
We have had the craziest alt season when you think about it, with tokens like Aster, XPL, Pump, you name it. There's been multiple $5 to $15 billion FDV launches. Same thing with NFTs. It's just less crowded, less crazy, less of the noise. But NFTs was a single, in my opinion, and I'm not an OG like you guys, most important onboarding event in the history of crypto, right? And back in 2021. And so the technology is still here to live. Most of these companies are powered by NFTs out there, and so they're still there, but maybe less from a speculation perspective, more from a technical perspective.
Just one thing to add, I mean, outside of the fact that NFTs brought in people from gaming and so on, that kind of stuff as well, and what we used to have as a metaverse, if you had a CryptoPunk, I would argue that CryptoPunks were probably the best levered bet on Ethereum. Right?
Yeah.
If you held the CryptoPunk, you would have been doing better than holding Ethereum. So there's cultural icons in whatever blockchain there are, they become your levered bets, because it's like in the real world. You could be having cash, but if you were invested in, let's call it the French economy, maybe you should own some Picassos. That's actually a levered bet on that particular industries. But so you pick the ones that you feel are those areas, and CryptoPunks is that for Ethereum.
A big part of why NFTs were sort of perhaps dropped a little bit in sales and popularity was the offboarding of royalty fees on platforms like OpenSea. Max, maybe you can talk a little bit about this and how much that changed the game and how we can try and remedy that with some new approaches, especially on TON and the network effects that you get with Telegram.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, royalties were essential for all the creators to basically make perpetual revenue. It was built in all the smart contracts, and then when OpenSea started and Magic Eden, I think Blur came out as well. They just decided to turn it off to save some fees, which is not great, to be honest. I mean, creators need to make a living. They need to basically, get paid for their IP. And it was a big controversy, essentially. Like, a lot of people were upset about it. You couldn't really legally enforce it, and people just stopped creating new ones.
First of all, the market is pretty much fragmented. There's like different marketplace, and obviously there is OpenSea, which is like a dominant market in the global like Web3 space. But the thing is that because there is no like a proper like utility NFT and the proper distribution, it leads to exactly the same the problem that you just described, that royalties are not easy to implement. Actually, most of the marketplaces, they had to roll it back just because of the competition, right? The competition drives this problem, basically like get it down to zero, basically, in most of the marketplaces. And the challenge here is, I believe, how to create the proper the friendly environment where all of the marketplaces or utility providers for these NFTs and the platform itself, like in our case is Telegram, which is like the place where everyone use on daily basis, like 100 times a day. And NFTs, like the attributes of NFTs should be respected in this case. If they're not respected, they are not adapted in the platform. So it means that, for example, you can lose some attribute, you cannot put it on your Telegram profile or a social media profile. Or, for example, NFT marketplaces will not be able to provide you the future, for example, future features, if you want to resell it or whatsoever. So that's important, I think, to create that sort of, the challenge is to create this environment, and this is why we are here and contributing in this.
Yat, I'm going to throw this one to you. When that was enforced and the removal of royalty fees kind of took place, I mean, as someone who's heavily involved in that side of the industry, is that worrying to you that marketplaces were doing something like that? And it essentially disincentivizes people to be creating NFTs?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I think the issue about the sort of royalties is that it's a kind of tax, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just don't like to pay taxes. Simple as that, right?
A tariff.
So when you start paying a tax of any sort, there has to be an incentive. Otherwise, it needs legal enforcement. Right? So what we ended up suggesting, which wasn't taken up because people don't like legal enforcement, but is actually created in contract. And just like the music industry and other industries, you could enforce royalties that way, and then you force the marketplaces and exchanges to honor that. That's one approach, right? But other than that, then you have to align incentives. So the problem with the royalties was that some companies built good stuff, but many of them basically just used royalties as a way to extract, shall we say, value that they never contributed back. Right? And that was part of the problem. So people felt like, why am I paying this? Right? Whereas, if you live in a country, you're happy to pay taxes because you have security, you have police, you have social services, and okay, you feel like you need to pay something. Right? There's an element, because royalties is still a social contract. For the most part, it's not legal. It is, you can enforce it legally, but it is an agreement that we have with people. So that means you have to innovate. And I think there's more innovation coming. For instance, if you were able to pay royalties, and you said that with the profits of the royalty, a certain amount would be used to maybe buy back NFTs, and now you've seen this in token models like Punk Strategy, right? It's an innovation on that model. It's still niche and new, but basically, they say that the more trading, people are paying a 10% tax. Like, who would pay a 10% tax on token trading? Nobody, except here I'm buying your punks every time you have a certain amount. Now I'm aligned, right? So I think royalties aren't dead. I think royalties just need to do what typically is good in crypto when you design the right tokenomics, which is designing alignment between all the parties, and then it works.
Yeah. Farokh, you've built like a powerhouse media business, right? When you saw NFTs kind of changing and perhaps falling out of the meta, was there any specific reason for that? And how do you approach the NFT space in general now as a business person?
I mean, I think the main reason is people are attracted to fast money in this industry. It's just the way it is, and we have to adapt to that with our media as well. I'm sure you guys are similar to Cointelegraph. We don't chase metas over at Decrypt. Rug Radio maybe a little more because it's more culture oriented, but like, I hosted a daily show, and NFTs went from being the main topic of conversation for an hour a day to maybe a 5-minute segment at the end of my show, and that's the truth, right? And obviously the eventual punk strategy thing you're talking about, but again, that's tied to an ERC20, so people are more attracted to the token than anything else. So it is what it is in a way. So I think like NFTs have kind of lost the allure of like the quick pump and the quick dump in a way, so that's a good and bad, right? I think it's better. But people still are attracted to that. Like me personally speaking, I have my CryptoPunk, never selling that. But the millionth token I'm buying, or I bought last night probably, I'm gonna get rid of that. And I'm not gonna feel I'm not gonna sell it and be like, oh damn, I feel bad, I missed my coin. But when it comes to an NFT, you're never going to be able to feel like you're part of something more than NFTs. And to this day, and I even see people in the crowd here that I met through NFTs, and that's what changed everything, right? So I think people are always going to want that. And on the media side, I mean, we still cover it. We do our best to like shine a good light on NFTs. Actually, you guys crushing over a ton. I had the ton folks over on my show. I think it was a week ago or two weeks ago. Right? Because I think it was you. Yeah, the plush Pepes are selling for like $25,000. I have a Rolex NFT next to my like Ton handle. They're like, yo, this thing's worth a lot of money. I'm like, I didn't know that. Someone sent it to me, and all of a sudden it's worth like $250. But there's like 100,000 of them, right? Something like that. So like, NFTs are thriving, and they're always going to be a flex. Like, I like to wear my watch. Some people wear digital watches on their Telegram accounts, and you guys are crushing that sense. So it's like, you're always gonna want to be part of this NFT movement no matter what. Like, the same way we're all wearing clothes that we like, and I like the same watch, like, you're always gonna like want to have your digital identity one way or another.
When I look at how that space changed, I think the biggest thing was like a distribution network. I think when there was kind of talk of Twitter maybe allowing you to have, like PFPs that you can own and trade, people are excited about that, right? But my approach to NFTs was like, if I really want to interact with my NFTs, I go to OpenSea, I buy an NFT, but like, where do I really put it? How do I really get people to see that this is what I have? And then you start interacting with, put up your hand if you use Telegram as a messaging app. I'm pretty sure everyone in the room is going to, okay, there's a few of you that don't, which is surprising.
We'll put a QR code up.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we'll bring it up on the screen behind me. But Telegram, for those of you that don't know, surpassed 1 billion users. That's a huge amount of people. People use it as a messaging app. There's channels, there's groups, there's all sorts of things that you can do on Telegram. And by integrating a blockchain system, it's probably one of the best examples of a blockchain being integrated with a network that has a network effect of 1 billion people. Facebook wanted to do it with Libra and everything. That was more of a payments network. But here you have 1 billion people that could potentially own their username. They can own sticker packs. They can do all sorts of things. I'm not going to do the talking here. I'm going to let Max and Andrew talk more about that. But 1 billion users is a huge selling point and a big reason why there is this NFT renaissance going on on Ton and in Telegram.
Like essentially everything is to do with distribution. Like you need distribution, distribution, and distribution. I mean, we're the only blockchain linked to a messaging app. It's 1 billion users around the world, probably 1.5 billion in the next 12 months. And for us, it was like creating a standard and leveling the playing field. Like if you want to build on Ton and come to Telegram, here are clear rules. It's creators first, serious artists, and that your royalties will be respected. Like it was just very important for us that if we do this, that everybody who builds in the ecosystem sort of is playing by the same rules. Yep. And then it's just a lot easier to get it rolling. And as they say, a rising tide basically sort of is lifting all boats. So yes. If you start getting the critical momentum, it's just more brands are coming, more IPs are coming, more users are coming, and it just goes, the flywheel keeps spinning essentially.
It's important to build the proper environment, right? So in this environment, the user experience should be seamless. The onboarding should be, with just a few clicks of buttons, you have to get onboarded. Like, for example, the payments should be integrated seamlessly so that it should be, NFTs should become accessible. Mm-hmm. And that's very important. And also you have to create habits. You have to create this idea of, that sort of ownership of this type of assets. And assets themselves should have, they can have value. Not just today, when you actually bought them, because you are ready to pay, that's why it has value, but because it will sustain value, or it might potentially grow in its value. So Telegram is contributing into Telegram assets since, I believe, the past, maybe 2.5 years. They started with Telegram usernames, social handles. So basically, that was the first NFT basically on Telegram that basically, the idea was to respect the ownership of the social handle, right? So the second one was anonymous numbers, and because it was scarce, only a few tens of thousands of these numbers, it grew its value. It was growing. The value was growing every year, and it's still growing, right? So because of scarce. Then Telegram launched Telegram Gifts, and I could compare Telegram Gifts and the platform itself as a pop mart concept, but that exists in a virtual world. And pop mart did everything great. What probably basically, it's a physical NFT, right? But they did everything, all the mechanics that we might imagine that existed in an NFT world, but which failed. PopMart did it properly, and I believe that Telegram also did it in completely the right way. And they educated users, right? So people shilling with this NFT, they put in their profile, next to the name, and also there's in PopMart you have Labubu, but in Telegram you have this plush peppers. People really want to buy maybe cheaper, more accessible NFTs, and then they want to potentially this NFT might have more value in the future, like this plush peppers. And now we want to democratize it, right? So we want to implement the standard. This is what we do, NFT 2.0. We want to, all this, NFTs might be related to gating, to different, closed communities, or it might be related to brands that want to kind of promote that sort of, their characters or whatever. And stickers, for example, is a great example of we interact with the stickers on daily basis, and these stickers might be a representation of the assets that you own, for example, because people like to show, for example, people who, we go to the road and we see people who own cars, own to watch, for example, they do this all the time. Telegram provides that, but in a virtual world, right? So that's the idea, create the ecosystem where there is a foundation from the technological perspective, from the user experience perspective, and also with various assets that exist, and people really become trusting this. So that's very important. So this is how we built it.
What is it going to take really to get NFTs back to the gold, like the golden season that they had? I look at something like Pudgy Penguins and what Luca did and built a really great business that took digital collectibles but also transitioned that across to real world experiences, plushy toys, like really big integrations with massive companies in America. It's probably one of the best examples, I think, of real world versus digital. Yet, do you think that is the standard that everyone needs to get to make NFTs pop?
I mean, I think there's one angle, but I think the number one angle still remains in gaming, right? I mean, if you talk about, you talked about digital flex, basically actually owning skins, owning gaming items is the number one digital flex. And to your point, it's not necessarily purely speculative. They keep it, they want it because it's a status symbol that they can have, right? Yep. And so I think what's interesting, though, is when you introduce NFTs, it comes a little bit into this sort of financialization as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like with Counter-Strike skins. It's not like it's just something that is a flex now, but it's also that has value. But because it has value, it becomes that flex and it amplifies it. Like if a Birkin bag was dropping in value, people wouldn't care anymore, right? It has to have that value as well. How do you maintain that? Which means you do need to introduce, basically financial constructions into it, right? And I do want to sort of use this as a little bit of a plug. I see Brittany right over there, right? And it's an example where, AlphaTon just announced basically the intention to acquire Gamey, which is a ton ecosystem gaming project, right? And with like tens of millions of users. And there you have a gaming community. Then, of course, owning these gifts and items is a way of a digital flex. But because the token moved because of the announcement, the community sort of moves as well and is happy, it drives it up. And I think this is what people might not fully understand in the traditional gaming world, is that you do have to show the financial outcome to basically give it that status item as well, which, by the way, luxury brands know incredibly well, right? And those are things, some of the lessons to get. So I do think gaming is a ticket, but of course everything else adds to it as well.
You know what I like about what you guys did with Ton is that they're just accessible. So the era of like the $100,000 NFT is never coming back.
Oh, I would disagree. Strong disagreement here, but let's talk a year from now.
No, so what I mean, I guess, is there's a lot, like Pudgies are 50 grand, Hyper launched at 60K, Punks are like 200 grand, and everything. I just think the era of like the Bored Ape coming out and going to like $500,000 floor, that's probably behind us, unless it's tied to something, pretty serious. But I just think that whole mania is out, and I think people just want more accessible stickers, for example, right? Like, for example, this is something we're looking at over at Rug Radio and Myriad now, is like, how do we build something within the messaging app that's going to be able to be accessed for everybody? Stickers make perfect sense. So we're going to do stickers. Yep. Hell yeah, exclusive for you guys. But, you know what I mean? So it's just like, I think the demand for NFTs is immense. The appetite for it is never leaving. But maybe, the era of just closing your eyes and buying any NFT and it going to like 6 figures kind of behind us. Yep. But that $100,000 NFT is definitely not that. That's going to keep going, especially as time goes, right?
Do you guys, Max, do you think the future of NFTs is just on Telegram alone?
Obviously not on Telegram alone, but it would be nice. Like for me, it's fan engagement, loyalty, and just the whole new spectrum which brands haven't really captured because it was too difficult.
Yeah.
Like it was, NFTs needed a wallet and a seed phrase and, some whatever chain. Like within Telegram, it's all within your app and it's abstracted away. So it's like, it's easy as sending a text. So, I think we have a good shot at making it in that regard.